I've been watching a lot of game dev YouTube. I've been watching it for the last like 10 years. And there's some YouTubers who've said some really stupid things. And what's so funny is we're going to talk about these pieces of advice. I'm going to call them the sneaky three. I'll tell you why they're called the sneaky three. Hang on. But these three pieces of advice have been rumbling around on YouTube and on Reddit and on Twitter for like a decade. And again, I've said these things too. And after 10 years of experience, I've been published 3 times. I've released 2 games on every single platform. On my 3rd game, it's a 3D game published by 3D Realms. Just giving you some credibility there. After all of this experience, I'm just like, oh man, the advice that these 3 things that I keep hearing over and over and over again, they're kind of bothering me. They're bugging me because I don't think they're true. What's so funny is they sound like proverbs, and we'll get into what they are, but they sound like these wise proverbs of game dev, when in reality, they're they're sneaky. They're sneaky. They're not true. Let's get into them. The first one is avoid feature creep. This one, it seems so wise. Of course you don't want to include too much in your game. Of course you don't want to let too much come into your game that is outside the scope of your game, right? And this is true on the surface, but there's a huge problem, which is, how do you know it's feature creep? Well, reference my GDD, right? Or let's reference the hook of the game. What's the hook of the game? Well, let's reference what the log line of the game is. What's the loop of the game? So for example, I've talked about this on live streams, but Twisted Tower. I'm working on a game called Twisted Tower. I released the demo, and what was so funny is the things that seemed like feature creep are the things that people love the most. So, for example, the confetti, when a balloon pops and confetti comes out of the balloon, or just popping balloons in general, or looting objects, breaking crates, just really simple stuff that honestly you think, well, okay, that's sort of just a side tangent for the game. Let's not worry too much about that. Let's focus on the enemy behavior. Let's focus on the adding bosses, the things that are really integral to a first-person shooter, when in reality, people love the balloons. So when I say you don't know what feature creep is, what I mean is some things are feature creep, some things aren't. It's up to your audience, it's up to your players to determine what the feature creep actually is. So that's why it's super duper important to test it with an audience, okay? So it's not that feature creep in and of itself is bad advice to avoid it. It's that it has a bad presumption, which is it assumes you know what feature creep is for your game. In reality, you probably don't. You might have a general idea of what your game's about, but in reality, you need to test with an audience, and an audience is going to tell you what they love. I was talking to Thomas Maller about this. He's the creator of Ori and the Blind Forest. He was talking to me about the balloons. He said, if it's fun, do more of it. Okay? Well, it's really up to you and your audience to determine what's fun. And that will help you determine, what feature creep actually is for your game. So yes, obviously you want to avoid feature creep, but it's way more important. A better way of putting this is just to say, find out what's fun for your game and do more of that. The problem is the only way to find out what's fun is to cook, okay? That brings me to my next one, which is the GDD, okay? And we'll talk all about what I mean by cooking, all right? I was listening to this podcast with Brandon Sanderson, and and Brandon Sanderson is an incredible writer. He wrote a book that I'm reading right now called A Way of Kings, or The Way of Kings, and it's in the Stormlight archives. Anyway, most of you know this, but anyway, he's a great writer. He talks all about what cooking is when it comes to writing, and we're going to talk all about that. By the way, this video is sponsored by Full-Time Game Dev. Check it out below. The link is in the description. The spring sale lasts for just 10 more days, and you're going to learn, how to make indie games from your bedroom, and more importantly, how to actually secure 6 figures with your demo, or how to get a publisher, or how to get funded on Kickstarter. I've done all of this. You're also going to get 2D Art Pro and 3D Art Pro completely free. So check it out below. See if it's something you're interested in. And hey, you're going to learn Godot, Unity, Unreal. Take your pick, whichever engine you want to learn. Take your pick. And the best part is I've got students, man, this is so cool. Students who have gone full time with the help of this course, including Chris Stair, who got published, Bart Mamser, who got 100K from his first big game and went full time. Also, Everflux Games went full time because of Kickstarter. Pretty cool, right? So check out the reviews below, see if it's something you're interested in. And yeah, 10 days left. I believe there's less than 90 seats available, and these will sell out. So check it out below, see if it's something you're interested in. Okay, so let's talk about cooking and as it pertains to the GDD, okay? So the advice that I'm arguing with is stick to your GDD.
A cook is someone like me when it comes to baking who can follow a recipe. And if I follow the recipe, usually I'll get what I'm trying to make. And it usually tastes something like what I'm trying to make. The problem is, if something goes wrong, I have no idea why it went wrong and what I could have done to change it. A chef is someone who can take the various styles of baking that different people use and apply them to their own process and create new things, not from a recipe, but that use the knowledge of previous recipes to create masterful new works. I want you to be a chef when it comes to writing.
The problem with the GDD is that it assumes you know the ingredients of your game. It assumes that you know exactly how to create your game, as if it was like a prefab house that you're building, right? Just follow the instructions and build the house, right? A GDD becomes more and more and more valuable, I would say, the bigger your team gets and the more experience you have as a game dev. Like, if you're a veteran with a big team, using a GDD makes sense. Why? Because, well, a GDD is really good to reference, right? And it's also for your whole team. And a game design document is something that you actually know how to craft as a veteran because you've done it a million times. You've made a certain kind of game a million times, so you know exactly what that game needs. And so you just put it out and you lay out the ingredients. Well, as an indie game dev with a small team, I would much rather you cook and experiment with the ingredients and throw some salt here and throw in some jalapenos there and try it out. Say, oh, that doesn't taste good. Then throw in some chili, right? Throw in some mustard. I don't know. Throw in all these different ingredients. Test it out and try it out. And you'll find out that what you planned in your GDD, the ingredients you put in your GDD, were completely off, right? And so it's kind of similar to feature creep, right? You don't really know what's fun or good with your game until you actually start cooking, start playing with the ingredients and seeing what was valid in your GDD and what wasn't valid. So, do you throw away a GDD entirely? No. In fact, in my courses I teach, fill out your GDD. But the GDD is by no means your constitution. It's by no means scriptural, right? Or infallible. It's just sort of a starting point. It's like an outline. And you need to be okay with completely wrecking your GDD. It's hard to say, GDD, or completely overhauling your GDD, right? So do a GDD, but just be okay with completely redoing it over and over again until you just don't use it anymore, right? Because at the end of the day, especially as a new indie, with a small team, it's really about experimentation, right? Now, does this mean that I think that you shouldn't have a hook and that you shouldn't have a log line and that you shouldn't have a game loop that's clearly defined and that you shouldn't have a focal point for your project? No, of course you need to do your very, very best to have that. But the problem is that unless you've made like 4 or 5 games, you really don't know. You really don't know if any of that stuff is any good. So why would I want you to lock yourself into something that's not good? Instead, cook, experiment, play, have fun, learn what's fun. Playtesting is, by the way, the answer to 1 and 2. We'll get to number 3 in a sec, but 1 and 2, The real solution is not to just completely throw out a GDD or completely ignore the idea of feature creep. The answer is test. Not you, your friends, family. By the way, only test with friends and family who are, number one, honest, and number two, they actually want you to succeed. If they're not honest or they want you to fail, and by the way, there's plenty of family members and friends who want you to fail. You probably know who they are. They probably popped in your mind. They probably live rent-free in your head too. Ignore those people. But if they love you, they want you to succeed and they're honest, get them to playtest. But more importantly, find actual people that you don't know online who like your genre of game and test it with them. I swear to you, it sounds scary and it sounds like, I'll do that later. You always sort of kick that can down the road. That is detrimental to your project. You need to find those people ASAP and start testing with them frequently, because they will tell you the definition of feature creep for your game. And they will tell you what in your GDD is working, okay? The last one. This is very similar to 1 and 2. The last one is you need to avoid the sunk cost fallacy. I've heard game devs talk about this. I've heard them use the phrase sunk cost fallacy a lot. I've done it. I've said it too in a different way. I've said you can't put lipstick on a pig, right? The sunk cost fallacy is something like, just because you've dug a really deep pit doesn't mean you need to keep digging and finish the pit, right? Just because you've put a ton of money and effort into this project doesn't mean that you should keep doing it and finish it. If it sucks, and you need to quit while you're ahead, right? Quit while you're ahead. That's another phrase. This doesn't work for me. I just can't wrap my head around this because, okay, I said this during a live stream the other day. I think it was 2 days ago. No, it was yesterday. I said, the difference between an amazing game and a really bad game could be 2 months of work. And look, I get it. It sucks because some of you might have a really bad game on your hands and it will never be better. No matter how hard you try and how many hours you put into that project, how many days and years, it's always going to suck. The problem is you don't know. You don't know. It's kind of like getting lost in the woods and hoping that around the corner is the road. For example, I'll come back to my game, Twisted Tower. The Twisted Tower demo was trash, okay? The first chapter of that game was trash in May of 2024. And I had it play tested at 3D Realms with the QA team. I had higher ups at 3D Realms play it. I had some of my Twitter followers play it. And people didn't get it. They didn't know what it meant, what the story was, what the theme. With immersive sims, you want it to mean something, right? You want it to have some sort of poetic meaning. They didn't get it. The combat was meh. Graphics, meh. They didn't understand the setting. They just didn't get it. So in my head, I was like, oh my goodness. Sunk cost fallacy. Why would I finish this game? Why keep moving forward with this game? Let's quit while we're ahead. Or again, why put lipstick on a pig? However, out of sort of financial necessity and contracted or like legal necessity, I kept moving forward and kept finishing the game. And lo and behold, all it took was 2 months of work to make it to go from horrible to really awesome. Like I think it has 1,000 reviews right now on Steam, the demo, at very positive. And truth is that a ton of those negative reviews are actually just because of the optimization of the game, the frame rate. My tummy's rumbling. So look, it was 2 months of just polish, and all of a sudden it became amazing. The same happened with Ken Levine. I was talking to Ken Levine about this with BioShock. He said 2 months prior to launch, nobody understood the game. Nobody got it. They didn't like it. Don't put lipstick on a pig. Quit while you're ahead. No, what the team did is they just addressed those issues and bang, you have one of the best games ever made. The sunk cost fallacy, it can be used, this sort of way of thinking can be used for something that has a bit more of a predictable business model. You know? Like selling, I don't know, kitchen equipment for restaurants, or selling cars, or building houses. You know, these are things that you can actually quantify and understand. Hey, we are actually putting money into something that will not be profitable. With an art form like a game, it's so much harder to just determine, hey, sunk cost fallacy. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. So what's the end solution here? The solution to all three of these pieces of bad game dev advice. It's not that you just completely ignore them. It's that we need to, at the very beginning, before we even hear this advice, we need to understand two things. Number one, this is an art form. Art forms are not easily measured. They're not, art forms cannot be easily measured. The metrics are difficult. It's very, very, very subjective. Number two, you don't know what you have until you test it. Understanding what your game is, what makes it fun, what makes it valuable, that's just not something that you, as the developer, can fully grasp. Your audience actually knows it better than you, to some degree. Again, another catch-22. Or I guess it would be a, what do you call it? Two opposing ideas. A paradox. It's a paradox. It's like, you know your game better than your audience, but your audience also knows your game better than you do. You need to work together. You got to work together to figure out what makes it actually fun, to determine what is actually feature creep for your game and what is actually, well, no, I do need to put more balloons in this game. I need to put more confetti in this game and more silly stuff because apparently people like it, and I didn't know that. Number two, when you know your audience, you could better determine what's actually working in your GDD and sort of lock it in. When you know your audience and what they think about your game, you can determine whether you're actually putting lipstick on a pig or you're putting lipstick on a beautiful hot model and you didn't know it, right? Your audience is going to tell you that. So, there you go. Those are my three things. 3 pieces of advice that I call the sneaky 3. Hope that helps. Hey, remember, check out Full-Time Game Dev, today's sponsor of our video. 40% off. You're going to get 2D and 3D Art Pro completely free. And then you're also going to learn Godot, Unity, and Unreal. Take your pick, whichever engine you want to learn, you'll learn in this course. 40% off, 10 days left. I think there's 90 or some seats left available. Check out the reviews in the link in the description to see if it's something you're interested in. And I'll see you on the private Discord server. Okay, hope that was helpful, guys. Love ya. Cheers.